Welcome to LOA Today. Walt and Louis D'Souza here on this Monday, October the 8th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy, not just for the day, but for the week. And we're going to try to get you off to a really, really good start this week, because the way we start our week is the way we set the tone for the week. And so if we set, I was realizing just before we did the podcast, Louis, I was telling you how I realized, Walt, I do a daily podcast every day about your daily dose of happy. What are you doing, Walt? You're supposed to be getting yourself happy every day. Get with the program, for goodness sake.
Absolutely. So simple, yet we forget.
We do forget. Yeah, it's so easy to forget this stuff. And like you were talking about just before we went on the air, this is one of the great influences that Abraham-Hicks has given us, that they've taught us to the one same lesson over and over again about how you feel, what your vibration, what your alignment is. In other words, how happy you feel is what determines everything in your life, which is one of the most wonderful messages in the world. They've been giving it to us, what'd you say, for 35 years? That sounds about right. And many people are now listening, and millions of people have listened, and some of them even apply it. So, yeah.
Some of the time.
Some of the time, right.
As Abraham says, when you're not interested in playing the drama.
Yes, exactly. And that's what it is, isn't it? I mean, we are so drawn to drama, but if, you know, I mean, and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with it.
TV series are probably the most popular, aren't they?
That's true. And not that there's anything wrong necessarily with drama, because drama really plays up contrast, and contrast leads to expansion.
Exactly.
You know, but do we really want to live in it? That's the thing.
How much time do we want to spend in it?
Exactly. There is more to life than drama. What a concept.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, everybody in America. Good afternoon to everybody in the UK.
That's right, yeah. And good night.
Around the world.
Good night to everybody in Australia. And I think it's the middle of the night in Australia. I think it's close to, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, something like that. But we still have loyal listeners there, which is really, I just get blown away, Louis, at how many listeners we have in how many different countries around the world. I look at my stats that show me, where the listenership is, and about 60%, not surprisingly, is here in the United States. But when you add all the other English-speaking countries in, I mean, there's many of them, it's just phenomenal, all the different places we have listeners. I get excited every time I look at it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm really proud for you, and I really like what you've put together here. I think it's going very, very well.
I think so too, and I appreciate people like you. Well, kudos to you and to my other co-hosts too. This would not be possible without you guys. I mean, let me tell you, I did a little special podcast about Donald Trump over the weekend, and I did it as where I wrote the whole thing out, because I knew if I was just doing a podcast by myself and kind of winging it like we do, I wouldn't be able to sustain that. Certainly not for 11 episodes a week. So, I mean, you guys are invaluable. You guys make major contributions, mostly because you take the load off of me. I don't have to actually come up with all the content 11 times a week.
I know. I'm very impressed in those guys who do have podcasts that speak for themselves.
Oh, God, yes.
I don't know how they do it.
I don't know how they do it either. I mean, well, let's just not go there, because that'll just depress me. So anyway, we were going to talk today about a little bit about your personal experience in how you discovered Abraham-Hicks, and what happened before, what happened afterward, what your influences were, and so forth. And I'm curious to hear the story, especially given your background, because you grew up in South Africa, which has had plenty of opportunity to experience contrast over the decades. And that contrast is, it's like any contrast, it could be a little overwhelming.
Well, yeah, talking about apartheid, I was brought up in, I said last time the middle of it, it's really at the end of it, actually. And it was really quite interesting. So apartheid is something that's not too well understood in South Africa in South African terms. Now, I'm open to correction here, but as far as I understand, when the English came over and had took over South Africa from the Boers, when the Boers took it back over again, the English had implemented the separation of the whites, blacks, Indians, and coloreds for education purposes, with a 30-year plan to bring them all up to the same level of education, because to put them all in the same class would not have been possible without taking the people that have had a far greater education, bring them down to the lowest education possible. So they split them up into whites, Indians, coloreds, and blacks. And they had different schools, and each group lived in a separate area. The coloreds couldn't live in the white area, the whites couldn't live in the colored area, the blacks couldn't live in the white area, etc., etc. So it was a complete segregation, area, schools, etc.
Mm.
When it came to work, anybody could go into the white area and work, or any area for that matter and work. But when you lived where you slept, you had to go back to your own area. I was brought up in the middle of this, so and I was brought up out of town. So I lived on the side of a mountain overlooking one of the biggest natural valleys in the world, and where there's some of the oldest rocks in the world. And I had a view over this incredible valley every morning when I woke up. And my dad was managing director of a forest concern in the area.
Mm.
And it was interesting because he worked with the blacks all the time. You know, they were the workers in the compounds, in the different satellites around the whole forest's areas. And he did a very, very, very good job of looking after them. He built schools for them. He went up every month and gave them prizes for the cleanest house and handed to them himself. And, you know, as he commented himself, you could eat off the floor. He employed a nurse who went around and looked after all the people and made sure they stayed healthy.
Mm.
Okay. Muriel, I remember her quite vividly. Incredible individual for the time, a black lady. And you know, for an example, one day when I was walking down the street, a black guy stopped me, never knew who he was, any shape or form, before, during, or after. He said to me, you're Mr. D'Souza's son, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He said, well, you know, as long as your father is running Twello Forestry, I will stay working for Twello.
Wow.
Okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just something that stuck with me.
Right.
But, you know, I was brought up with a family that didn't really have a color bias. We lived in the mountains, so we weren't segregated from anybody else from a point of view. You know, we weren't in the white area of town. We were on the mountain where we had, you know, gardeners and things like working for us on the property and all the rest of it. So we all lived together. I had a mother who was British. I had quite a different upbringing, and it was very liberal. You know, we were open to speaking or talking or interacting with anybody. There was no real restriction. So I was brought up very
how unusual was
colorblind.
that? How unusual was that? I mean, because the impression outsiders get is that it was really strongly the whites against the blacks. But is that necessarily the case? I mean, was there a considerable population among the white population that was liberal?
So the ones that were staunchly against, like any bad element, is usually the minority, and that was always the case in apartheid as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the minority, which they called the staunch Afrikaner, who was generally considered the fighter and supporter, and I can tell you some incredible stories.
I'm sure.
About an experience I had in a town for 2 days.
Wow.
I can go on. It was the head office of these guys who were kind of against, strongly for white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll tell you a little story. I went to school, and we were studying history, and the history in South Africa was a lot about the Boer War,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot about the British coming in, and they couldn't, kind of South African Boers started terrorism in a way. For you got these British who are used to standing in rows with guns and shooting, with their silver jackets, with their silver buttons and their red jackets, and
Right.
so you've got this kind of concept where where they hide behind trees and they shoot these guys. It's quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't. They captured town after town, but they couldn't capture the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite interesting because the only way that they could eventually break the Boers back, who could shoot from a horse in a full gallop 100% accurately, these guys didn't have much chance against them in an open bush battle. So they actually, the guys used to live in the bush and then go back to their wives and children and pick up all the food and stuff and then go back into the bush. So the British said the only way they could conquer the whole Boer thing was to eliminate the wives and children from the farms, put them in a concentration camp, and they consequently died of fever and all other things because they didn't look after them properly. So they mass murdered women and children, and the Boers gave up because all their wives and children were dying. So that's how the British won the Boer War, which is quite harsh.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
So I went to school and I was learning all this. And I came back violently opposed because of the way the teacher presented everything to the British.
Mm.
So I go to my mom and say, "Mom, I hate the British." She says, "Well, do you know where I'm from?" England. He said, "Oh, do you hate me?" No.
Oh, dear.
So I bring that up to kind of give an idea of the kind of environment I was brought up in.
Yeah.
Education now. We were brought up to think that the blacks were inferior. And not only the blacks, but the others, but mostly the blacks. And it was proven to us time and time again because the blacks wouldn't save money. They wouldn't prepare for the future. They would live for now. And we perceived that from white, European values to be wrong and bad and not planning for the future, where in a sense, they were kind of living more for today and carpe dieming and doing what we're now learning is right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
With the law of attraction. So it was really quite an interesting experience being brought up there and having all these different opinions and thoughts and discussions going on around the place. I remember my dad always used to say something, "You'll only have one man, one vote once." Now, the implication of that is very obvious to a South African, but maybe not to you. Did you
because of the difference in numbers?
Yes, difference in numbers and the proven track record of black leadership in Africa is they want to tend to stay in power.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
They want to have autocratic rules.
Which is actually a very common thing around the world.
Yeah. It is. It's not limited to that, but it's
not at all.
Quite obviously and quite brutally done in Africa often. I look at old Mugabe and that whole example. So it was a very, very, very difficult upbringing from one perspective, because when I left South Africa, even when I was walking to go pick up some money at a cash machine, I was looking over my shoulder. I couldn't have anybody walk behind me because this was the programming I'd learned to stay safe in South Africa.
Oh, yes.
So I had all these barriers and all this stuff. And Mandela, just before I came out, had just been released, and he was now president. And it was quite difficult for me over in the UK to kind of get to grips with, was I pushing the blacks down? Did I suppress them? Did I think of myself as superior? And all these concepts were going through my head where, I wasn't brought up with a strong opinion anyway, or either way. So I was getting asked every second, what do you think of South Africa and apartheid and all the rest of it? And I was
as if you were responsible for solving whatever the problem was, right?
Well, not only solving it, but I was supposed to have the inside track and know everything.
That's right, yes.
And be guilty because I was a white South African. And all this stuff was going on. And it was really, really tough for me at the time. And it came to a head when I was in Scotland at like a little youth hostel. I was in Isle of Skye wandering around, and this guy came up to me and he said, what do you think of the South African thing? And I was like, oh my God, I've had it.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. And I just blew up and I said, I belligerently said, I hate the blacks. They smell bad.
Oh, jeez, really? Oh,
Okay.
God.
Now, this was a Scottish guy, and he absolutely went ballistic.
Oh, my.
I hate you, South Africans. And, he just absolutely, absolutely apeshit on me. I mean, that's really, he was so incredibly powerful, this violence that came out of him. Obviously, the suppression of the English to the Irish had an effect on it. And it's in their culture, suppression and
Right.
rebellion and all the rest of it. And literally my knees were shaking at the amount of incredible vibration of anger and disjustice and all the rest of it he threw at me.
That's a really good point, by the way. Before you go further, we often forget about this, but in the midst of very strong negative emotion, that negative emotion has a very big yet very unpleasant power to it, and it is a palpable power. It's not just
Very palpable.
it's not just emotion power, if there's such a thing as just emotion in the same sentence. But it's not just emotion. It's a physical power. It's a physical experience that is very unpleasant and very difficult.
Mm. And I stood there and I shielded myself with a white light, and I just stood there and I centered myself and let it all go, and I let it all flow around me, and everybody in the room was absolutely riveted and shocked, and all the rest of it. The words that were coming out of this guy's mouth was absolutely unbelievable, and I just let it all die down. And when it was all died down, I said, I've only got one question for you. Have you ever been to South Africa? He said, no. I said, have you been to Africa? He said, no. And I said, well, then you don't really understand. And I turned around and I walked away, and I just left it at that. And it is really difficult for anybody to understand who hasn't been through it all. People look at it from so many different points of view, but to actually live through it is a very, very different experience. And one of the biggest reliefs that somebody gave me through wondering if I was bad or wrong, or if I'd done something wrong, being born a white South African and living in a white area and being brought up with the privileges that I was or wasn't. It was a guy said to me, never judge. This was when I worked for the Metropolitan Police. There was a colleague of mine, and he said to me, Louis, don't ever judge a nation. You can judge an individual, but don't make the judgment on the whole nation. He said, because you get nice whites and you get shit whites, and you get nice blacks and you get shit blacks. You get nice colors and you get shit colors. And if you judge them individually on their action, sure, that's fine. But don't lob that into an entire nation, into an entire culture, into an entire people. That brought me a huge amount of relief. I started realizing the truth of that statement. It was very, very important to me at the time. And then, of course, where I am now is I have very little what's the word? I don't have any isms. I don't really feel anything about racism, sexism. You can all the isms. They kind of mean nothing to me, because what they're meaning from the Abraham-Hicks point of view now is putting your nose in somebody else's business, and it's one of the prime things you should not do.
And it's one of the things that we do most easily.
Yeah. And if you just mind your own business, all of this stuff just vanishes.
It's true.
If you want to be gay, you can be gay. You want to be racist, you be racist. If you want to be sexist, you can be sexist. But I know what I'm doing, and I know where I'm going, and I'm going to clearly show that as an example. And that's it.
I think there's a parallel concept here that I learned, not so much from being taught it, but just kind of learned it on my own as I was growing up. Because here in the United States, we've also had a great deal of difficulty where race is concerned. And while the nature of it's been different from what South Africa experienced, I mean, whenever you're talking about race, there's a definite commonality to it. And I mean, I kind of went through similar stuff myself. I never really lived in an area where there was any significant proportion of blacks compared to whites. It was always, I mean, when I went to school, I don't think there were any kids in my elementary school other than whites. And I think the first black faces I ever saw were in
Hmm.
my junior high school or middle school, as it's now called. And I didn't even know what to make of it. I had never heard about, at that point in time, I never heard about the racial struggles. I lived in the far north of the country and never heard at all about the racial and segregation and the
It's amazing how you probably didn't even see any of people of other color for
yeah, oh
quite a
yeah,
while.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
The earliest person I can remember, we attended a Presbyterian church, and there was one member of the church who was actually from the Caribbean. Always loved his name, Sosthenes Soleil. What a great name, I thought. But this just Soleil was a very nice man, very gentle man, very kind. And I can't remember what his wife's name was, but she was also a really nice person. But very dark skin, and I never seen that before. And I didn't know what to make of it. I thought maybe he'd been injured.
Seriously.
Seriously, I didn't have any idea what to make of it. And
Didn't you have TV?
it wasn't on TV.
Didn't you have TV with showing people of different colors?
No, that was the point. In the 1950s and 1960s, seeing a dark face on TV was exceptional.
All right.
Very rare. I mean, one of the earliest
It's
that I can
difficult
think
for the
of.
younger generation to really understand that.
It is. Oh yeah. It was completely, and I'm sure it was deliberately programmed that way. But I remember, for instance, there was a movie that came out that's a fairly famous one. Came out in 1967 called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, starring Sidney Poitier and also Spencer Tracy and Kate Hepburn. And
Great actors.
oh yes, wonderful actors. And it was an excellent movie too. And I remember watching the movie and just being like confused, like what's this all about? And it was around the same time that the March on Washington had happened a couple of years earlier. We were about a year removed from the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. So it was just as the whole thing was really starting to take on a national role, and I was just bewildered by the whole thing. I didn't understand what was going on. I mean, it was pretty clear to me that I didn't like what I was seeing. I had not been taught, since I wasn't brought up in the South, I wasn't taught the racial stuff. I wasn't taught, the black's inferior or any of that other stuff. I'd never been exposed to any of that. All I knew was there was this crazy thing going on, and I didn't understand why it was going on. And
Hmm.
that was a different situation from what you experienced, but it was confusing as heck. But anyway, the point that I wanted to lead up to is I learned within a few years. It took a while because it was such a confusing topic. And by a few years, I mean like 20. But I learned within the first 20 years of my life that there's really only one way that I can think of that works for me to handle racism. And that is to not think about people in terms of race. And
Absolutely.
and so whenever I've met somebody, whenever I've talked with somebody new, regardless of what their skin color was, I just look right past the skin color. And there are two interesting factors that go along with that. One factor is it does make it a lot easier to get past the racial barrier when you just don't think in terms of race. But the second factor is
Hmm.
you are held guilty of, I'm not sure exactly what, by those who do consider race.
Hmm.
And that's, I don't know exactly how that might relate to your experience, but it just strikes me how,
Elaborate what you mean by held guilty.
well, it's like there's, I don't know exactly what it means, to be perfectly honest, but
Huh.
um, it's like whenever I talk with somebody who is racially charged, doesn't matter their
Right.
skin color, but who is racially charged, if I don't accept the idea that I should be understanding people in terms of their skin color, then there's something wrong with me.
Oh, okay. I mean, I struggle to understand that because I've met very few people like that. They just haven't come into my life. I don't know. I've just never really come, even though I was born in South Africa and all the rest of it, I haven't come across those who are strongly opposed or think that they're right and others are wrong. I haven't come across too many. I have come across some, but not great friends or close or anybody I had to spend much time with. Um, it's interesting how I've never drawn those kind of people to me. And when you understand the law of attraction,
Yeah,
you kind of
right.
understand how you can be protected even though you're in the middle of something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
absolutely, sure.
Because I, from a young age, started having past life experiences, and I was an
Did you really?
Indian, playing the flute or whatever it was to the snake
I love
drama
it.
and sitting in the dust, and so I've had lifetimes where I've been every color. Who cares? So this lifetime I'm a white. So what? It's of no particular value to me to look at what color it is. It's we're all soul and we're all playing with contrast, and
Yeah.
what color skin you choose to play the contrast with is neither here nor there. It's not important at all. And now you say you look past the skin color. I look at the skin color and I appreciate it. Great, you chose black this time in this life. Great.
Oh yeah. Oh, me too. I think I may have explained that wrong. When I say I look past the skin color, what I meant is I look past the associations about skin.
Yeah. Every subject to subject, you're not focusing on what you don't want about that.
Exactly.
Yes. So yeah, it's really interesting the whole racial aspect and all the rest of it. So I'll tell you about this little town I went to. It's called Morganzon, and some very good friends of mine lived there for a while. They left Johannesburg, left a big business, and they went to run a cafe in the middle of racially white-charged South Africa town called Morganzon. And it is a small town, and I arrived there just to visit them. I was like curious because I've never experienced anything like this in this kind of town and these kind of people. And they had taken over the shop, and they had taken over two of the employees, and one of them was like the guy who ran Shotgun, and the other lady, his wife, was kind of looking after the meat section. And it was all interesting, and I went there, and she was saying, this place is mad. That's what you mean.
This place is what? What was the
mad?
word?
Absolutely mad.
Oh, mad.
This place is off the charts.
Really?
So what do you mean, Alva? Tell me the story. Tell me something. He said, well, this couple that they've got a son. Okay, he's like 18 years old, and he's been trained with a gun from tiny. He wanders around with a gun. And I said to him when I was there, I said, Vickers, can I see your gun, please? He looked at me, shook his head, but he said, come with me. So we went around the corner. Nobody could come there. So he whipped out his gun in a fraction of a second, opened the cylinder, put all the bullets in his hand, closed it, and then gave it to me within a fraction of a second. I hardly saw it. And I was like looking at the gun. Okay, cool. So I was finished with it. I gave it back to him, put the bullets back in a fraction of a second, closed it, put it back in.
Wow.
Like, huh? Now, the story Elva was telling me was that they bought a goat to slaughter it for meat, and it was grazing, and then it pulled off the leash and went running down the road. So this young guy, 18-year-old, gets into the bucky of the van, open back van, and they're driving full blast after the thing, and out of the window he shoots the goat, and it falls dead, and he goes and picks it up, puts it in the van, and they cut it up and they eat it. So then the police come around to the mother and father and said, we can't have your son running around shooting in public. And the father got extremely angry and said, what the hell do you mean? That is dangerous and all the rest of it. He said, how many shots did it take to kill this thing? And the police said, well, we have to admit it was one. He said, where was the shot? He said, straight between the eyes, dead shot. He said, where's the danger? And he stormed out there.
Oh, jeez.
So these are the kind of people you're dealing with. And then I was walking down the street, and it was so funny because, you're looking at, you're looking around, and I see the police station. I said, oh, okay. And it says there, huge letters, huge sign, right of admission reserved. And I almost fell down laughing myself silly on the ground. I was absolute. A police station saying right of admission reserved.
It's pretty wild.
So, like, if you're the wrong color, don't come in here.
Apparently, yeah.
And, the whole town was completely warped.
Wow.
I can go on with stories about that, but that is just a fraction of them.
So anyway, you found your way out of that. I don't mean just geographically. I mean you found your way out mentally, emotionally, philosophically. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, I'd always been interested in life and who we are and where we're going. So I just continued following it. I had my past life experiences, which helped. I started having out-of-body experiences, which has been one of the pinnacle changing points of my life.
I have to interrupt and just tell you, sometimes I feel like I've lived a life of lack because I don't experience any of those things. And I'm talking to all these people who do, and I'm thinking, was there something wrong with me? I mean, you guys have all these experiences, and I'm just sitting here saying, yeah, that's not anything like I've ever had. Wow.
So what you're saying is how I felt before I had my first out-of-body experience.
Right.
Okay. So I was saying exactly the same thing. Reading all these books. I've bought these crystals, and everybody says they're powerful. They're not powerful. And then I put them under my pillow, and I have these incredibly vividly colorful dreams. I took every single crystal I had. I put it under my pillow. And one night, and I had this incredibly scary, vivid. No, well, it wasn't scary. It was only scary because of the vividness and the colors, the colors.
Really?
That I literally went and dug a hole in the garden and put all my crystals in. I was that scared.
That's wild.
So, I hadn't had any experiences with crystals before that, but now I had a respect for them.
Yeah, apparently, yeah.
So these things happen as and when when you're ready and what's necessary and what you focused on. And I was passionate about understanding more and knowing more, and when you know what you don't want, you kind of get to what you do want. So,
It's funny too because when you were talking about putting the crystals under your pillow, what I thought you were going to say is what ended up happening is that you just had an uncomfortable night because you could feel all these crystals under your pillow all night.
Nope. No, one of the most colorful experiences I've ever had. That's all I can say. It was really something. I mean, no idea the colors in the inner planes, what you can see. But I had all these problems with race and all the rest of it when I'm in Europe, and I often thought it is the subconscious thoughts that are getting to me. And I hear that the subconscious runs 90% of your life, and only 10% conscious of what goes on. I was so relieved to listen to Abraham-Hicks absolutely blow subconscious into the dust.
And let's do a little quick review here. What exactly does Abraham tell us about the subconscious?
Well, it's fascinating. First of all, Abraham says, let us talk about this subject based around the universal law of attraction. Okay, let's keep it in the context of how things actually work. And then Abraham was saying, somebody one day came up with the concept of subconscious, and we think this is where it came from. We think it is you focused on what you didn't want and what you didn't want and what you didn't want. And it became an active vibration, right? And that active vibration comes back to haunt you of all these things you didn't want, isn't it?
That's true.
And people blame that on the subconscious. But you were conscious when you made those decisions. You were conscious when you focused on what you didn't want. It's not coming out of the oblivious. It's not coming out of some nebulous area. It's coming out of your creation, because you create your reality. So you must create what is in your subconscious.
So the implication being that once again we can't get away with anything. We're the ones who create it.
Completely. Absolutely.
I tell you, every once in a while I just have to have a little fit. Like, darn, I can't get away with anything anymore.
Yeah, you just want to kick and scream. So, you know how Abram often says, you think it comes out of the blue, but it comes out of the oblivious.
The oblivious? Oh, I hadn't heard that one. That's good.
Haven't you? Yes. No. You're just not aware of what you put into the vortex when you were thinking about what you didn't want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Abram goes on to say, I'm not going to shout, but there is no subconscious in the strongest, clearest expression of raised voice I've ever heard from them.
Which basically flies in the face of a large chunk of mankind's collective knowledge.
Absolutely. And they go on and on to explain more and more about the subconscious. I'll send you the link if you want to the actual YouTube video.
Yeah, if you have that handy, sure.
That breaks it down, because it really is important to get clarity about what the subconscious is.
I'll include it in the.
Was saying, you know, it's like painting a picture. Painting a picture of your life is what they were getting at. It's like painting a picture with your eyes closed. That's what thinking about subconscious is like. He says the journey's so much more delicious if you open your eyes.
So be a conscious creator consciously, not unconsciously.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, don't give your power over to something that is not there. That is just thoughts that you thought that you didn't want, that are haunting you.
It's interesting, too. I mean, because there are a number. I've been talking quite a bit about this mental bank concept, which does base itself upon the idea of the subconscious mind. And
well, now you have a clearer idea of what it is.
Well, yes. And what makes it more interesting is when I look at the method actually makes sense. It's just that it doesn't really make sense in the way that they theoretically put it together. But what it produces makes sense, because what you literally do with the method is you start focusing on stuff that you want and taking your attention off the stuff that you don't want. And it gets attributed to rewriting the subconscious mind. But the bottom line is you end up in the same place that Abraham's recommending.
It goes back to my glass of water.
What do you mean?
You remember I talked about the glass of water that's got some dirt in it.
Oh, I see. Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, some murkiness in it. So if you keep on pouring clean water in again and again and again, you're going to clean out those thoughts which you have activated, the thoughts that you didn't want, the active thoughts that you didn't want. You're going to clean them out.
You dilute them and wash them away.
And Abram goes on to say about the subconscious is, you know, we really need to sell the vortex to you.
So the vortex was their attempt to counter the idea of the subconscious mind.
The vortex is a collection of everything that you want that has come out from what you don't want. And it's sitting there. And your only job, is to get in the vortex. There is no other job. You get into the vortex by feeling happier. Okay, by changing the subject to subjects that are good, that you like, milking them, which happens several times a day, and you know, you just milk them.
Let me ask you something then, before we go any further, about this vortex concept, because the vortex always kind of confused me anyway. Because I was trying to, it wasn't until I went to an Abraham-Hicks workshop that I finally found out where the vortex was. It's to the right of Esther Hicks, because that's where she swirls. That's where she swirls her hand around to show you the vortex. But no, seriously, I really didn't understand where the vortex was, and I didn't understand what it was. I had about as much understanding of that as I did of the subconscious mind, so it really didn't help me a whole lot in that sense. But you know,
and how clear are you now about it?
Somewhat. I mean, I can't say I have a really clear idea of it. I've heard a lot of what they've talked about with it, but to me, it sounds more like a metaphor more than anything else to me. But they talk about like it's a real thing, and so I'm not sure, what does that mean? What does it mean to say that the vortex is a real thing?
So you know this mental bank they're talking about,
right?
In this other program.
Yeah.
So Abraham, I like looking at the vortex as your positive rocket of desire bank. Okay. So every time you know what you don't want, you have a better idea what you do want, and your higher self, your soul, your non-physical self stores the program, the active vibration of what you want.
So is that an
And that's
abstraction
on
to
many
you?
subjects. That's on many subjects.
No, I get that, but is that an abstraction to you, or is that a physical, real thing?
No, it's not a physical, real thing. It's a non-physical, very real thing.
It's a non-physical, real thing. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes. So the non-physical holds everything that you want, and in a bank. So when you start aligning yourself in all the different ways we know how, you get closer to the vortex, and you've been having experiences. I've been listening to your talks, and I'm excited for you about getting into your vortex,
Mm-hmm.
starting to touch on it, starting to feel it, starting to play with it.
Yeah, I dip my toe in every once in a while.
Yeah. And every time you're really happy and excited and focused, like I am now, because I love the subject and I love talking about these things, and it does it for me. That's why I wanted to be on the show. That's why I'm talking to people everywhere. That's why people bump into me everywhere and want to know this kind of information, because I'm a real vibrational
You're a vibrational junkie, is what you are.
junkie. Yeah, for what I love to share. So it's so easy for me to talk about the law of attraction, to talk about these subjects, to explain it to people, because it's so simple for me, and I enjoy it, and it's fun, and I don't need to convince anybody, and everybody must take what they want and leave what they want. And it's fun to watch. Sometimes I get feedback, and oftentimes I don't, because they don't feel that they should tell Louis that it's helped them. Because I am very confident and all the rest of it, and they probably feel I don't really need that. But, the vortex is sitting there, and it's a bank of everything that you want. It's come out of what you don't want, and it's waiting for you to touch into it, because when you touch into it, you get ideas that fills in the grid of helping you manifest what you want. So your only job is to spend time there, because if you touch in the vortex and you get something out of it, you can write a song. I watched this incredible movie. It's an American guy who wrote a song. It's a religious song, and it went viral, and Amy Winehouse wanted to sing it, and then she gave it to him, and he sang it in front of thousands of people, and it became a huge hit, and I can't remember, but it was a beautiful thing. But he took 5 minutes to write the song, and it really got to people's hearts and all the rest of it. It's a beautiful movie. But when you're in the vortex, everything is quick and easy, and you're getting exactly what you want, and that's a vibrational harmony to everything. So your only job is to get into the vortex.
Now let's take a moment and just stop there, because that's a key concept, getting into the vortex. What does that mean to you in terms of what you do personally? I mean, how do you
I'm
get
in
into
the
the
vortex at the moment.
Okay.
I'm doing what I really love and I'm passionate about, and you can feel it in my voice, and you can feel the vibe, etc. So when a singer's out there really performing to his heart's content, and he's really enjoying it, and you can see the singer's on the mark, when the baseball player is on the mark, when the performer, no matter what art they're doing, is doing amazingly, that's when you're in the zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, Abraham-Hicks says, now this is the interesting thing, it's easier to teach somebody to still the mind than to remain positive.
Which is true, by the way.
Do you know why?
I don't think I have a clear idea why. Tell me why.
It's quite easy, because of the two-ended stick. When you really know what you want, you've also got the thoughts, maybe I haven't got it yet. When's it coming? Lack of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you go to the positive side, and that's another thing Abraham-Hicks was talking about, the subconscious, is, you can focus on positivity all day long until the cows come home, with the exact words of Abraham-Hicks, and it can take a long time for some people. And everybody in the audience laughs. Okay, I remember quite vividly.
You mean we need to have a laugh track? Oh, okay. Let's see if I can help you here. Oh, that's an applause track. Sorry, that doesn't work. I know I got a laugh track here somewhere. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, see, I knew I had a laugh track here.
So So it can take a long time. So let me go back to my childhood. I was at school, and this girl had just won the award for the best talk, a debate, and she got up on stage and she told it to the whole assembly, and it was all about positivity. And I was sitting there feeling really annoyed and frustrated and angry about this great talk about positivity. I said, something's missing, something's phony holy here.
Hmm.
What is it? What is it? What is it? And I never worked it out till Abraham-Hicks. Okay, what was wrong was the two-ended stick. Why is it easier to teach somebody to still the mind, to access the vortex, rather than to be positive all the time?
So be a little bit more clear there. What is it about the two-ended stick that clarifies the question about why it's easier to be still in the mind than it is to be positive?
Okay, so it's more difficult to remain positive. And this girl was talking about positivity, and I felt something was not right about it. Okay, and what it was right about it is when you're really positive and you're really focused, you often feel the lack. You often feel the other side of the scale, the negative side of the swing, pulling you.
And
Okay.
that raises an interesting question for me.
Yeah.
The interesting question is, if you're feeling that, are you really focused on the positive?
You're not. Okay, so if you could be purely positive all the time, you wouldn't be in the physical universe. Agreed? You'd still be non-physical.
I don't know about that. Maybe I'll think about that one.
Okay, I can tell you now that some of the most enlightened individuals, like Christ, on the cross, said, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me? Okay, was not focusing on what he wanted at that precise moment.
This is true. That much I do know.
Okay, so one of the most amazing manifestors that stories that this world has known of individuals, okay, walking on water, feeding thousands of people with a couple of fish and bread, turning water to wine, etc., etc.
Mm.
So this guy was a master manifestor, if you believe the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So even in his death, he was going through contrast.
Right.
Contrast was helping expand him.
Mm-hmm.
So we come down here to expand, and we can only expand really through contrast. We come down here to expand via contrast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when we're pure positive energy, we don't have contrast, we don't have expansion, so we create the physical universe so that we can play with the contrast, so we can expand. I don't know, does that sound good to you?
Well, it has some plausibility to it. The thing that I'm not convinced of yet, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just like I guess I haven't given any thought in this particular line of thinking. Is if we are in pure positive energy, is it impossible to be in the physical world?
Great question, but if we were in pure positive energy, why would we come into separation if we could just stay there?
Well, apparently we come into it because we want to expand.
Exactly. And we expand through?
The experience of the contrast.
Therefore, if you're in the physical universe, what does Richard Bach in Illusion say? If you're alive, your mission on this earth is not complete.
True.
Okay. So you're still playing with contrast, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I get that. The thing that occurs to me is
you can't stay positive all the time in the physical universe. No, not possible.
Well, not so much that. It was more along the lines of if you are in pure positive energy, you can't be here. The idea is since the beings that leave the universe leave to go into positive energy, the conclusion is that you can't be in positive energy and be here. But to me, that's a fallacy.
No, they can, but they're here when we're positive. They're looking through our eyes when we are in alignment with them.
That would be closer to true, I would say.
Yes. So Abram can look through Esther's eyes and talks about it vividly, about seeing some lights and butterflies and other things going around. And Abram is saying, I can go in and see through your eyes because you're in the vibrational level of me. And when Esther is channeling Abram, then she is a vibrational match at that time. Mm-hmm. And then Abram is able to go and have a look through. But the source energy never comes down to our negative vibration, never lowers its vibration. And Abram said that 1,000,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're high enough, Yes, they can see through our eyes, etc.
Hmm.
And they understand everything that's going on. They can feel it all.
It's an interesting concept right there because you mentioned the idea of the vibrational match. Now, a match, as we use that term here in the physical world, means that A is like B. A and B are essentially mirror images of each other, or you know, two leaves from the same tree or whatever, and that concept suggests that for the moment that Esther, in this example, is receiving Abraham, she is in high positive vibration
Yep.
and
Okay.
high enough to be at the same level as the person who is the non-physical being.
Yes. Okay. And the question.
And the question is, well, doesn't that suggest that you can be positive and be in the physical?
Of course, you can be positive in the physical, but you cannot maintain it permanently if you're in the physical.
That's the part I'm not sure of yet.
Okay, because Abraham-Hicks says the solution to everything is focus more on what you want, less on what you don't want.
Right.
And don't want expands you. And
Right.
you can turn the corner quicker.
Right.
So, yes, you are going to go out of the vortex so that you can have your expansion.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to lower your vibrations so that you can get the kickstart of the expansion.
I agree with that, and I think all of that is true.
And then
I'm just saying that you don't have to come here solely for the purpose of expansion. You don't have to be in the physical world solely for expansion. Is what I'm thinking.
Okay, where can you be? So you can expand in the non-physical. I mean,
I mean you can come to the physical world without at that moment in time desiring expansion.
Okay. And what are you desiring if you're not coming for expansion?
I'm not really sure. I'm not a non-physical being right now. Anyway, I have a part of me that is, but that part of me I'm not in great communication with.
Non-physical.
I understand that, but I also know I'm not in great communication with that part of the being, so I can't really connect to that and give you a communicative answer on that.
No, it's fine. I mean, I love it because we're always exploring and trying to understand more and more and more. And this kind of conversation really excites me because you're so knowledgeable and somebody I can really talk to about it. And it's great. I'm really appreciating it.
So anyway, let's get back to your story because we're talking about the transition that you experienced before and after Abraham. And when Abraham first came into your life, you must have been already primed for it because when the listener is ready or when the student is ready, the teacher appears, that kind of thing. Yeah. You know, so you were apparently ready. What was ready about you? Do you remember? Do you have any sense of that?
To me, I've always wanted to be clearer. And still today, I want to understand clearer. Okay, there's no end to my incredibly strong desire for clarity and simplicity of understanding the rules to the game of life.
So were you motivated by contrast?
I was motivated because I had grown spiritually hugely, but I felt I'd plateaued.
A plateau, okay.
Yeah. And I really wanted to shoot forward further and further and further. And when the Abraham-Hicks teaching came along, it gelled so incredibly with me to the degree I've thrown out the word like spirituality. It doesn't really ring true to me the way I used to understand it. Words like trying to gain enlightenment, striving for enlightenment, all of that has fallen away. Abraham-Hicks teachings is kind of not removed them, they've kind of replaced them with clearer understandings. So it's like spirituality, the word. What does it mean to me? Growing spiritually means of becoming purer, nicer, kinder. What does spirituality mean to you?
I don't think I have a clear definition of it. But what I can tell you is that it is a way of understanding the difference between beingness and physical matter. For me, that's the biggest use for the word spiritual. Spiritual means to delineate between matter and a living being.
Matter and a living being.
Yeah.
Living being, matter. So I'm a bit confused.
Well, because living beings are living regardless of whether they are in matter, whether they are physical.
Okay, so you're talking the word spiritual is the non-physical part of you.
Right.
Okay.
Well, more precisely, it is the source energy part of me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Better words. I
Yes.
agree. So in the past, I used to see it as wanting to be gooder.
Gooder. Oh, I like
Okay? I wanted to be gooder. I wanted to be spiritual. I wanted to
that.
be the
Not that I
nice
like the
guy, the
concept.
kind guy, the right guy.
I just like
You
the
know.
word. I think the word gooder is a great word.
I know. I know. I just wanted to be gooder. So, and that didn't feel good to me after a while. You know, I like Madonna's song. Good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere. I wanted to go everywhere. I wanted to play with the contrast,
That's
So this
funny.
gooder thing kind of got nailed on the head, and I wanted to understand what this non-physical part of me was, and I wanted to get greater clarity of it. And I must say, the out-of-body experiences, huge. I can talk about those at some stage as well. What was the other thing I said? Enlightenment. So the Abraham-Hicks concept on enlightenment completely shifted me. So they said, anybody who's more enlightened spends more time focusing on what they want, not what they don't want.
This is true. This is very true.
Okay? That's all enlightenment ever was, ever is, ever shall be.
Yeah.
From a non-physical perspective, you're playing with contrast, and you play from being a rock to a plant to an animal to a human. Okay. And Abram says, you may choose to start that whole process again after you've been all enlightened, you're some guru on this planet. Okay. You may choose to start as a rock again, because ultimately Source wants to expand, doesn't really care how it happens.
That whole concept of expansion too is something. I mean, we really don't have enough time to do it on this program because there's only about 3 or 4 minutes left. But that's a concept that I think we could spend quite a bit of time on.
We could, because both you and I have said that we would like to speak to Abram about that.
Yeah. Well, also, I just want to understand more what they mean by it. What exactly is expansion? What's doing the expanding? Why is it expanding? Why should I care about it?
My question is, what has Louis D'Souza offered to the expansion? What does it look like?
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. That's a valid question
too.
Like? Sure.
What does it look like? What have I done to help the expansion? So, it makes sense to me that there is a desire for expansion, and it happens to the contrast, etc. But what does it really look like? What does it feel like? Greater clarity on that, I think, would really make the worthiness clearer.
I agree. Since we only have a couple minutes left, I need to get our promos in. So let me do that first.
You usually do it at the beginning.
Usually at the beginning, but the discussion got so good that I had to keep going and just say, we'll just do it later. But the 2 messages obviously we put out all the time are, first, if you are not yet a subscriber, please do become a subscriber. I mean, you get this kind of great conversation every single episode with a different person. I mean, because I have 8 different co-hosts that I do this with, and I mean the perspectives are just mind-boggling. Really, really good. So become a subscriber. The instructions on how to do it are on the homepage of our website at loatoday.net. Most people actually can probably figure it out. I mean, on an iPhone, you can just do a little search for LOA Today within the podcast app. On an Android phone, basically you're best off downloading the Google Podcast app and then doing a search there. But either way you do it, whether you do it through the instructions on the homepage or just doing it yourself, please become a subscriber. You're going to love it. And then secondly, for everyone who is a subscriber, please keep putting out there the fact that you're listening to loatoday.net on your favorite social media channels, because it's making a big difference. It's helping us grow the listenership. We want the world to get their daily dose of happy. We want the world to understand and appreciate the concepts of Abraham. We want the world to be a happier place, because that makes the contrast so much more fun to deal with. So please help get the message out there, and we really appreciate all of what you've been doing to do that. So, okay, Louis, you get the last 30 seconds. What's the summary for what we've been talking about today?
Summary. The summary is always the same. Focus on what you want more than what you don't want.
There you go.
And really try to get into the vortex and focus on all those fantastic feelings and experiences that you've got in your head. Go back to them, milk them. Just milk them.
Fantastic.
That'll help you get into the vortex.
All right.
Guys, have a great day. Love chatting.
Love chatting with you too, Louis. I can't wait to do it again with you next week.
Next Monday.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.